Hello, everyone. I'm so grateful you could join us. I'm Roy Steinberg. I'm the producing artistic director at Cape May Stage. And while this pandemic has shuttered our theater, we've actually been very lucky in a way to have 4 different platforms so that we can still feel engaged with you. I mean, one is we've been doing a group of play readings, everything from our favorite productions to new plays. We've also had lectures from our costume designer, our set designer, directors, casting people, as well as our sound designer. And we've had concerts, some world-renowned performers, people like Jarrod Spector, who played in the original Jersey Boys. And we have had the guy who was in the original Rent, so Adam Pascal. And some wonderful, wonderful people that you can tune in for. But my favorite, I have to say, just selfishly, is we've created a little talk show. And I've had the opportunity to talk with really fascinating people, everyone from the local historian here in Cape May to actors with whom I've worked, some of whom have written books and some of whom, one holds the record for the longest running show in the world in history. That was James Reynolds on Days of Our Lives. And today I'm going to be talking with someone who I've admired for such a long time. He was here briefly in one of our early shows and then went off to Los Angeles. And his name is Darrin Hickok. So welcome, Darrin.
Hello, Roy.
Great to see you again, my friend.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You know, it's so interesting. You were born here in Cape May. You went to the local high school here. You did a play for Cape May Stage called Mistakes Were Made, although we didn't actually see you. Tell us a little bit about that.
So that was, that was quite the experience. It was my first time as a puppeteer. I'm playing Denise. And I remember when I had first reached out to you about joining Cape May Stage, I had just said, I think I emailed you and you replied immediately and you said, yeah, we're breaking down a set right now. And could you come over and help us? And I remember coming over and helping you. And shortly after, you reached out to me about playing Denise. And I didn't know what a puppeteer was, like the functions of a puppeteer at the time. I learned very fast. And it was an experience. It was quite the experience.
You were wonderful. I have to tell you, this is something you may not know, but we share that. When I was a young actor, there was an ad in one of the trade papers saying they were looking for a puppeteer. I'd never been a puppeteer. I knew nothing about it, but I figured, hey, what the hell, you know? And so I showed up for the audition, and I booked it. And what it was The Wind in the Willows, the famous Wind in the Willows, and they liked my voice. I was playing Mole. I played Mole with a Liverpool accent, but I didn't know anything about puppets. As it turned out, the people with whom I just stumbled upon later started a little company called the Muppets, and yeah, so Kathy Mullen, who became one of the executive producers, it wasn't Jim Henson, but Kathy Mullen was the person behind it. And every morning, early in the morning, we would do a puppet show for New York City school children. And then I would go from that, usually, I'm like 20 years old now, you know, so I would go from that playing a puppeteer, having learned, this was hand and rod puppets. So I learned how to manipulate the hands and the rod and had the greatest teachers in the world, really.
Well,
yeah.
I felt the same way having you help me with Denise and how to work the functionality of the fish with it, because it was on 2 sticks.
Right, that's right. Yeah. So just for those of you who don't know this play, Mistakes Were Made is basically a one-person show. It's a low-level agent on the phone, and he's having a really terrible time. Things are terrorists are kidnapping his camera crew, and the only thing he's got is his pet fish, and the pet fish is actually a puppet. So it's actually, you know, clearly not realistic, but hilarious. And requires acting. That sounds funny, but the fact is, the fish sometimes is a comforting fish and sometimes is a challenging fish. And so it really needed another voice, metaphorically, and you supplied that. And so you were just a wonderful actor, even in the very beginning, before you were really on stage, using your physical instrument.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was an experience because I'm about 5'11", 6 foot, almost 200 pounds. I'm a pretty big guy. And I had to go into like the fish tank and kind of curl up. And it was on, I think there was a sleeping bag or there was, what was it? That was underneath me. It was
some kind of pad we had for you, like a little
kind of pad. So, sometimes when you're underneath there, if you get sidetracked, you can kind of lose track of like, where are we at? And Michael is such a talented actor, and him interacting with the fish, you had to be spot on. And, so I was kind of curled up in the fish tank, and it was an amazing experience. And it really taught me how professional theater runs, which was.
And you mentioned Michael Basile. When you mentioned Michael, who was really the man who did the one-man show, a fascinating actor in real life. He is also a New York City firefighter. So that's his straight job, and an equity actor and a really brilliant actor as well. You see him on TV quite often, and we've had him back a number of times. But as I mentioned earlier, your physical instrument, what people might not see right now on camera is, speaking of physical instruments, you've got this like body that is like everybody's dream. You're this beautifully built, defined. I guess one of your jobs, I think, was also training people. Is that correct?
Well, that's how it really got started. And that's kind of what led me to find Cape May Stage in a weird way, because I was already in New York City for a few years before I came back home. And the reasons why I was coming back home is because I had my own training business. And a good friend of mine, who a lot of people in Cape May know, is Matt Caesar, who won the World Series with the Chicago Cubs. And he had reached out to me when I was in New York, and he was like, "Hey, I know you have your own business. I'm interested in working with you." And then we ended up training together, and we would do camps for 4 to 5 months in New Jersey. So I would leave New York City and I would come home for a 4 to 5 month camp. And him and I are both really big. We're into the arts, and we love art. And he goes to me, he was like, "Would you want to go to Cape May Stage and go see a short film about a local artist named Victor Grasso?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would love to." And we came to watch the short film, and I became infatuated with Victor Grasso and his work because it's incredible. And then I just became hooked, and that's when I emailed. I think I looked on Cape May Stage's website, and I must have emailed 15 different emails, and then you were one of the first people to get back to me. And I think I said, "My name is Darrin Hickok, and I was just, I wanted to learn more about theater." My manager at the time was like, she said something that sticks with me today. She was like, "If you can do theater, you can do anything." And I had this idea when I first went to New York. I'm like, I'm just going to be a television and film actor. And now it's like, I'm all about theater, and I love it. And so you gave me the opportunity to really see how a professional stage works. And that's how I kind of found you guys.
Yeah, well, I think these days, most actors, well, I shouldn't say most, but many actors are, they don't define themselves as just one medium, just film or just television or just theater. There are many actors who do it all. And in my case, I started with the theater and then became involved in film and television. I produced and directed, as you know, daytime television, Guiding Light and Days of Our Lives, and for a bit on One Life to Live and elsewhere, and worked on some films as well. But for me, I just feel most at home in the theater and love the theater. And I'm so grateful that I found my life there. But that's the thing that I really wanted to talk to you about, because I did kind of the reverse we did the reverse of each other. You were born in Cape May, and then you went off to Los Angeles. Well, I was born in New York, and I spent most of my life in New York City and Manhattan, and then went to Los Angeles. I lived in Studio City. Where did you live? Where do you live?
So when I first moved to New York, I lived in the Bronx on 231st Street in Kingsbridge. Well, they had it listed as Riverdale, but it was definitely Kingsbridge. They just wanted to charge me more rent. and then I eventually lived in Midtown in Hell's Kitchen.
And then in LA, where did you live in LA?
I'm right here, I'm on the border of Beverly Hills and West Hollywood.
Right.
So one part of the apartment is listed as Beverly Hills, and
River. So for me, it was an adjustment of leaving a place like Beverly Hills and all of that to come to Cape May, which I adore. I love living here. I feel so grateful for it. As we speak right now, I am just a few feet from the shores of the Delaware Bay. My house is literally on the Delaware Bay, so I'm just so beside myself. It's great.
You don't have to be anywhere else.
Right? Now you, having grown up here, made the transition of first the Bronx or Riverdale to the West Coast. What was that like for you, and how do you navigate that?
So it was really tough, to be honest. You know, when I first got started, I started off as like a fitness model doing print work in New York, and there's a moment in my life that kind of defined, I feel like, who I am as a person, and it was a pivotal moment that just sticks with me. And I remember being in, telling my mom I was going to go to New York City, and she just made sure I had enough money to go, and she was like, "How you getting there?" I said, "I'm going to take the bus." And so I remember sitting on the curb waiting for the bus to take me to New York City, and you know, I'm from Cape May, and it's a tiny town, and I was terrified. And the only thing I really wanted to do was I wanted to go back home so bad because I could just smell my mom's cooking and the candles lit, and I just going to New York was just like I was this close from turning back around and going home. And that kind of stuck with me when I had to make the decision to leave New York and go to Los Angeles. And because of that moment, I knew that I had made the choice one time and I overcame, you know, every obstacle I kind of had to face. I knew I could do it again. So that's kind of what made me, you know, feel comfortable with picking up from New York and heading to Los Angeles and really trying to navigate the waters. But it's much different trying to navigate Los Angeles scene compared to the New York scene, because here you have to get in a car and drive to your all day way and you're there in 10 minutes. So.
Right. And I found, I don't know if this was something for you, but in New York, I can't walk down the street without bumping into people I know. And so it's very, you know, it's serendipitous. You'll just have coffee with or a drink with some friend that you just ran into. But in LA, that doesn't happen. You have to make an appointment to see somebody if you want to have a cup of coffee.
Yes, and that's one of the things a lot of people would ask me, like, how do you live in New York City? I'm like, how can you not live in New York City?
Yeah.
And it's essentially just a little community. You know, I'd go get my food, and I know the guy who's, you know, helping me bag everything. And you just know everyone in the neighborhood, and I miss that.
Yeah,
I really do miss that.
well, you know, I don't know your parents, but I must say, not since I don't know them, they've done an amazing job of raising you. At my age, I can say that. But what I mean by that is you're just such a genuine, kind person who, you know, has this, I mean, you could very easily be a stuck-up jerk. You know, you're a handsome guy and you've got this killer body. What's it like living in Hollywood where there's a lot of people who look like you? You know, I mean, I know, I mean, I used to, you know, as a producer director of a soap opera, so everybody on my show, you know, ate nothing but skinless chicken breasts and lettuce, you know, and they worked out, you know, every day, and you know, had these amazing bodies, and some of them were wonderful actors. Some of them, quite honestly, were not. They were just very handsome or pretty people. But since I love actors so much, I was often the person who, or at least sometimes, the person who would come in and coach some of the actors. On Guiding Light in particular, I would coach some of those people. But in New York, again, it was different in that people would literally do a soap opera during the day and then have a Broadway show at night.
Yeah.
So in LA, it's not the same.
When I first moved here, it took some time to get used to, and you know, because of the environment I'm surrounded around, as far as my friends out here, I'm there. I'm like, I touch base with, you know, some of the biggest actors in the world, and you kind of see that they're just normal people. They're just regular people who are into the arts, and some who are in it to be a celebrity. Well, they're two different things, in my opinion. You know, you have the artist who you want to work on, you want to do stage, you just want to work, and then you have people who want to be in the limelight, and that's definitely not me. So to be honest, I'm kind of out of that whole like scene of Los Angeles. You know, there is a scene out there, and I don't know. I kind of stay isolated, and I'm always trying to create. Whether it's you know, am I answering your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I stay kind of isolated, and I create, whether I'm painting or I'm writing or I'm working on a monologue. Behind me, I have all the great playwrights and everything like that. So I'm just constantly trying to read, because I didn't go to a traditional drama school, you know. And so I feel like I've always felt kind of like I didn't belong. And so I had to work extra hard. And like for me, like if you look at my resume on paper, it's not really that impressive, to be honest. To me, it is, because I didn't know anyone in this industry. All the connections I have now is because I made the choice to hop on that bus and go to New York. I
Right.
made the choice to hop on the plane and go to Los Angeles. And I've had to just work extra hard. And so that's one of, I think, the things that make me stand out is, you know, I know if I'm hired, I'm extremely grateful, for one, because as you know, it's really difficult. There's millions of people out here trying to do exactly what I'm trying to do. And so, I mean, and being from Cape May helps too, because I come from a place where just very humble beginnings, and which kind of shaped who I am as a person today. Um, so so for me, it's like I show up prepared. I show up an hour early to set. I remember even doing Death of a Salesman with Rob Morrow, who's been in the industry for years. He's a 3-time Emmy, Golden Globe nominated actor. Been in films like Quiz Show with Robert Redford and Martin Scorsese, Private Resort with Johnny Depp. Him and I, we would kind of fight to see who would show up first to the theater, and to see someone who has been in the industry for that long and still have that kind of work ethic was inspiring. And so I show up early, I show up prepared, and I'm okay leaving as late as I can. And I feel like that's what has gotten me hired throughout my time here in Los Angeles. So
You know, you mentioned growing up and some of the other arts you've done, including poetry. And I know you wrote a poem about you as a 10-year-old and being on the lawn of an old man. Tell us a little bit about that.
so I've always been I've always been kind of a deep thinker. And growing up in Cape May, it has its pros and cons, right? You know, the pros outweigh the cons, but the cons are like everyone thinks they know you, or you have a tough time kind of expressing yourself, because you don't want to be that kind of vulnerable guy. And so for me, writing has always been something I'm not very good at it, but I love to write. And so poetry, I've been writing poetry since I was about 13 years old, when I first went to a skate camp called Woodward. It was in Woodward Skate Camp in Pennsylvania. And at the time, you know, my mother didn't have the money to send me there, but she kind of scraped her pennies and sent me there. And she made sure that the deal was I had to write in this journal every single day when I was there. And so I did. And when I came home, I had poetry and I had some things, and I explained how grateful I was. And I remember about 2 years ago when I came home from Los Angeles, I just read it just to read it. And it brought me to tears, because, you know, it was, as a kid, you're just so honest, you know, there's no kind of fluff or anything mixed into it. And yeah, it's just writing poetry and writing in general it's an escape for me.
Well, you know, what struck me about that particular poem, well, two things struck me. One was all of the sensory work you do, teach acting as well. And one of the tools we have as an actor is our senses, you know, creating, whether it's through your imagination, the sense of smell and taste and touch and what you hear, what you see, of course. You know, you speak of a worm and watching a worm, and that in itself is a kind of acting exercise. There's something called an effective memory, where you remember something from your childhood and see where that leads you emotionally. Sometimes actors will use that to get to an emotional place they're trying to get. But the other thing that really resonated for me was that you love seagulls. And of course, there's lots of seagulls in Cape May.
My
But
favorite bird.
the seagull, as you probably know, is the logo for the most important theater in Western history, which is the Moscow Art Theater. And Stanislavski created that theater with Chekhov. And Chekhov wrote a play called The Seagull.
I read it at Cape May Stage.
That's right. That's right. And one of the things we do at Cape May Stage is we bring great works of literature as well as new works, and sometimes not so great works, and sometimes really important works. We just read, for example, No Exit by Camus, which is about three people who are stuck in a room. We thought for the just stuck in a room because of the pandemic. This would be the book to read right now. In his case, it was a play about hell, about three other people with somebody else's view of hell. But I found it fascinating that in this one poem, you touched on both as an actor, one of the great tools we use as performing artists, and that you mentioned the name of seagull, which is such an iconic part of the theater. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No. Yeah, I mean, the seagull is my favorite bird. I tell people that and they kind of laugh sometimes, but it just, I guess the hardest part for me in this whole kind of pursuing this career in this industry, the hardest part is always leaving home, and leaving Cape May, because you're going over the bridge and you see the sunset coming down, and then you hear the seagulls, and,
Right.
and it just reminds me of home. So the seagull is something that's very, very close to me. So.
But you speak of home, you speak of family, and so many of the most important plays are about family, and Death of a Salesman is certainly one of them. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that production. How did you get cast in it, and what was it like doing it?
So that was actually one of the best experiences I've ever had in both professional and in life. So Paul Ruddy, who's a good friend of mine who just won an Emmy, he casted me in my first film out here in Los Angeles, and he knew I had some theater experience, and he knew I love theater. And so he had called me up out of the blue, and he's like, "Hey, would you want to audition for Death of a Salesman?" I said, "I would love to. It's always been on my bucket list." And so I kind of had Biff in mind. And he's like, "Well, the role of Biff was already cast with Gethin Anthony from Game of Thrones, who was originally supposed to play Biff, but he ended up leaving." And so I asked who I was going to go out for, and he's like, Howard Wagner. And so I was like, Howard Wagner, and I'm like, oh, Willie Loman's boss. I'm like, I love that scene in that moment. And so I went in for the audition, and I kind of went in there nonchalant, and I felt no pressure. I was like, kind of, we'll see what happens. And I ended up feeling really good after I left, and I got a call back, and they said, would you come in and read again? And I said, yeah, sure. But this time we want you to audition for Howard Wagner and Stanley. And Stanley is the waiter. And I said, okay. And so I knew right there, it was a moment to kind of show two different sides of me as an artist. And so I auditioned, and then I got another call back. They said, can you come back again and audition with Rob Morrow? And I said, yeah, sure. And then I knew that, then I started feeling a little pressure. I'm like, okay, here we go. And the moment I walk in, I see an actor who I can't remember his name, but when you see an actor who his face, and you're like, I know you from somewhere. And that's what happened. And I'm like, oh, I definitely didn't get this, because I'm a no-name talent, so he was obviously named talent. And I went in there, and I felt free after that. And I just kind of gave my performance, and I got a call back, and they offered me the role. And so going through the process, rehearsal, Lee Garlington, who's an amazing actress. She's been in the industry for years. It was just a great experience. John Ruskin in the Ruskin School, they do a great job over there. It was an amazing experience. So
now, you said you hadn't had formal training as an actor. Did that inform this rehearsal process?
Well, no, I didn't go. I didn't go to like a college or a university. I did go to William Esper Studio, and I had the chance to work with Bill Esper, which was incredible. And I've studied with Beverly Hills Playhouse, UCB, and I've been to many schools. So I was prepared, and I already had a couple productions underneath my belt. And Cape May Stage helped me prepare. Going through the process and watching Michael come in and prepare for that role, and it just prepared me to go out. And so I was ready. I felt really good going into it, and I got really good reviews, thank goodness. And
Congratulations.
thank you. We were in Los Angeles Times, Hollywood Times, and we were pretty much the #1 selling show here in Los Angeles for.
And where did you actually do it? What was the venue?
At Ruskin Theatre.
Mm-hmm. So. Right, great. Well, Bill Esper, who sadly passed away this past year, was one of the great and important acting teachers, and a number of his students and his teachers. In fact, Joel Rooks is a teacher at Bill Esper, was a teacher at Bill Esper Studio, and he has performed Freud in Freud's Last Session for us, and he also played George Burns in Say Goodnight, Gracie. So Bill Esper has actually come to Cape May Stage to see, and I think perhaps he came to see Michael Basile and something.
I think I remember him actually saying that.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I was just have a really funny story with Bill Esper and the first day of class. So there's about, I think, anywhere from like 20 to 30 students in the classroom. And me being the kind of shy guy I am, I sat all the way up in the corner to the far left, so I could kind of hide. And that was a mistake, because the first day of class, he comes in and he looks at the first person in the first row sit to the far right, and he says, okay, I want everyone to introduce themselves. I want you to say your name and 2 facts about you. And so the first person said their name, and then he looks at the next student and he goes, I would like you to say that person's name, their 2 facts, and then the same about yourself. Wow. So I was sitting all the way up, and then I had to remember every single person's name and their 2 facts.
Oh, no.
And for me, it was a challenge, and I was kind of hyper-focused on everything, because I'm like, I cannot let Bill Esper see me fail, not on the first day of class. And I remembered every single person. He looked at me, he's like, good job. So I just remember that moment. So
you worked on Death of a Salesman, and then you've also done some film. Tell us a little bit about the films you've worked on.
So when I first started, it was a lot of student short films, and then I had landed an independent feature, which ended up not filming, which was kind of it was good for me in a sense that I kind of could understand how productions and how films being made, how they work. Sure. And so we shot the teaser trailer, and I guess that we didn't end up getting the funding for it. So that kind of fell through. And then I worked on a few television episodes. And then when I first came out here, I shot a Lifetime film, which the local papers had written about it in the papers. And I died in the first 5 minutes. And so a lot of people don't understand, you don't have a say in what falls on the editing floor, unfortunately.
Right.
And so I felt really embarrassed, but I'm like, that's kind of the name of the game. And then the next year I worked on a film called Triassic World, which was really fun, by the same producers who make the Sharknado films and everything like that. So that was a fun film. And then Death of a Salesman. So I've been very fortunate to be able to work professionally at least once a year for the past 4 or 5 years. So.
That many people may not know that as actors, you may make a ton of money for a week and then not work again for months and months and months.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but you're a trainer as well. Are you still a trainer?
Well, I've had my own training business now I started my own business in my early 20s. And I've been very fortunate, because one of the things I've been able to do is I make my own schedule. And so if I have to be somewhere or I have to do something, I'm able to kind of navigate around that, which has been, a lot of actors don't have that opportunity, unfortunately.
Right.
So. And
if I'm not being too personal, if I am, just tell me I'm being too personal. When I knew you had this beautiful partner that you were with. Are you still that person, or are you no longer with them?
No, I'm not. And you know what? She's still, very close to my heart, and right. She always will be, because we were together for almost 8 years, and she's definitely one of the reasons that she helped shape me, and she was much smarter than me, and she helped me in more ways than one.
Yeah, women always are.
Yeah, no.
I can't believe I'm alive. It wasn't for certain people like my wife.
I agree. And she was one of those, I still love her to this day and always will. And, unfortunately, I went through whatever I was kind of going through internally, and probably went through one of the darkest times in my life before I came out here a few years ago. But, you just, that's life, and you kind of have to learn how to roll with the punches.
Well,
And
Los Angeles is a challenge. I mean, the thing that I found, and I don't know if you have or not, but it was more stratified than New York. By that I mean, in New York, as I mentioned, you'd have actors who would be on Broadway in the evening and then do commercials during the afternoon, or a soap opera or something, or a puppet show for that matter in the morning. And at one point, I would do a puppet show in the morning, a children's show in the afternoon, and when I was 20 years old. And I was also at the Jean Cocteau Repertory Company at night doing classical theater. So I went from, I did 3 jobs every single day. And of course they all paid like nothing, but in my mind, I was like a millionaire because I was actually getting paid for being an actor.
yep.
So that was fine. But in Los Angeles, it's very stratified in the sense that you're a daytime television producer versus a primetime one versus a feature film person, and where you are on the ladder. And nowhere is that more apparent than when I've gone to the various award shows. Because I'd go to the Emmys, and the primetime people or whatever would be in the front, and way in the back would be the daytime, which would be me. But it became very, very clear. And a few people can break out of it and have, but for the most part, it's very difficult, both for actors, directors, producers, to break out of that where they put you. They'll say, "Oh no, you're not a feature film guy. You're a daytime guy, or occasionally actors do break out of it, but most of the actors I know out there are in whatever genre they're in. They're film people or they're television people." And once in a great while, as I say, a Jennifer Aniston goes from Friends to being a feature film star, but that's rare.
No, it is. I know a lot of people in the soap world out here, and for some reason, I've always found it mind blowing how they get that kind of oh well, he's a soap actor, or he's this or that. I'm like, do you realize how hard it is to be a
Oh, yeah.
soap actor? It is extremely difficult.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Well, before I ended up actually producing and directing them, I was actually on a soap opera as an actor for about a year or more, called Another World, which doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
But in those days, in fact, I was just recently watching something I did, and I said, "Oh my Lord, those scenes were long." I mean, these days the scenes are relatively short,
Oh yeah.
but they were like 60 pages of dialogue, and we learned those overnight. And
I,
oh my gosh.
I helped Tamara Braun, who's on General Hospital, and she's two. I think she has 2 Emmys. And I remember helping her with some sides, and I'm like, "You got to do this every day." She was like, "Yeah." I'm like, "I would be so stressed out if I had that amount of dialogue." I mean,
Yeah.
so it's difficult. It's very difficult. And you were in Guiding Light, Days of Our Lives for 4 Emmys, right?
Yeah, yeah. On the directing and producing side, yeah, yeah,
Wow,
not
that's impressive.
yeah, yeah. They're very, very different. In fact, and my training, of course, was for the theater, so I
Yeah.
still remember. In fact, it's hilarious. And I think back on it. One of the first days on Another World, I was complaining to my dressing room mate, who's who was now the executive producer of 30 Rock, among other things,
Oh wow.
Donnie Scardino, as playing. I was his superior, his doctor, the head of the doctor hospital, whatever, and he was the young intern, the handsome young guy, who had some kind of mystery vaccine or whatever. And I fire him, in the course of many, many months and weeks and so on. But I remember saying, this is the opposite of everything I've ever been taught. Taught to explore, and within seconds, at 7 o'clock in the morning, some guy, turned out later it was me, that guy would say, "You sit here, you get up there, they slap you, you walk, go to camera 3, and you're out. Okay, go to hair and makeup, and we'll see you on the floor. And then millions of people are going to be watching you." And every time I did it, I remember this, every time I did it, I begged for another take. I said, "I can be better." And they said, "No, you're great." And I said, "No, no, no, I could be better." And I realize now, when they said you were great, all they meant was I said the lines and I was in focus.
Well, because you don't have time to internalize like
No.
your character development, and like it's a
Yeah.
lot. It's difficult.
Yeah.
One of my good friends who Robert Admonson, he was on Young and the Restless for years. he helped me prepare for. He was in Death of the Salesman. He ended up playing Biff after Gethin left, and he was on Young and the Restless, and you know, the amount of dialogue he was receiving. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. And he's like a veteran. He's been working since he was 18 years old.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just don't know how you guys.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I mean, to me, learning the dialogue wasn't that crazy. I have a pretty good head for that, but the other part of it, I mean, just wanting to bring something fresh and original and new, and bring my stamp to it, and, for lack of a better word, to be an artist. Nobody cared about being an artist, and I had to learn that over and over and over again. You have to fight to be an artist.
Yeah.
I remember too, even when I was directing, I would come up with some, shot that I would agonize over, and in fact, that was one of the Emmy Award nominations. And oftentimes those were the shots, if the show was long, that they just threw out. They didn't have time for pretty arcing shots, and you were shooting with mirrors and all kinds of, some what I thought of as creative stuff back then.
Mm-hmm.
But if the show was long, they just went right to the end of the shot, and that's where that told the story. All they cared about was, did he kiss her or didn't he kiss her? Yeah, he kissed her. Okay.
Got it done. Cut.
Right. Now, speaking of kissing, which none of us can do very much these days unless you're quarantined with your partner, how is that affecting your work and life in Los Angeles?
So, obviously my business is at a complete halt. I'm pretty heavily isolated right now. Because I have OCD in general, so catching COVID is not something that I want in my system.
Right.
So, and you never know. I want to take the side of caution, because I could be fine, but I could be that one person who, reacts differently to it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to experience it. So it's unfortunate, because I don't think I'm going to be able to come home for the holidays. But I can be in a room for 24 hours and be perfectly fine. Because I can read, I can write, I can play my guitar, I can keep myself entertained. So it's kind of scary how much I like being isolated and alone.
Yeah. No, I was just saying to my wife too that we feel very blessed that we're in a pretty place. I mean, as you said, we have the Delaware Bay, the beautiful sunsets, clean air, clean water, and fortunately we like each other, so we don't think of it as hell.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult, particularly for some people who are alone, or if you're with someone who you're having some issues with. I understand from friends of mine who are therapists that their business is booming with people who are in therapy, because they're finding real challenges with sometimes just negotiating their lives, with someone who you're having some issues with.
Yeah, no, I'm fortunate because I am with someone, so I have, I can talk to someone, but I couldn't imagine being alone during this time, because it is a difficult time and people are facing real hardship right now. And not to mention, when I first moved to Los Angeles, it was just like a kind of fairy tale land. It was beautiful, and it was golden sunsets. And now, I've been out here for close to 4 years. It's different. It feels a little gloomy, and people it's much different with everything going on.
Is it different because of COVID or for some other reason?
Well, I think, because of the pandemic, absolutely. And you see a rise in homelessness, it's so sad to see.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the crime rate is rising a bit, and it just feels different. When you go out there, it feels much different. And I can't really explain it or pinpoint it, but it doesn't feel the same.
Yeah. Well, I know just watching the news, it breaks my heart when I see photographs of fires in places I know, and places where people who are my friends live.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw last night in Irvine, in Orange County. I mean, these enormous walls of fire. I mean, I used to go there all the time because there's a great arts complex. If you haven't been there, I encourage you to go. And Irvine has some of the great theater and concerts and so on. It's heartbreaking.
No, I can see the smoke from my upstairs. It's sad, and not to mention all the animals who lose their home right now too.
Right. That's right.
It's weird times right now.
Yeah.
It's definitely weird times.
Although, it's interesting that in film and television, at least, because of technology, there is an opportunity, and I don't mean just these Zoom calls, which everybody has been doing some version of, but I know that people, the Directors Guild, for example, has a set of protocols of how, with different zones, of how to remain safe and where the most difficult zones are. It's always around talent, quite frankly, because the talent is asked to do things that are dangerous. You get in fights, or you kiss, or you're certainly closer than 6 feet away, or you shoot in such a way. And I know this is true for my friends who are still involved in daytime, where with camera angles, you can make it appear that somebody's closer than they really are. So the actors can, in fact, be 6 feet away, but make it look as if you're shooting over someone's shoulder, and they're not that, they're right there.
Yeah. Well, I know that I guess the projects are starting to pick back up. I'm guessing now. I know in the beginning, a lot of people were going non-union. I guess a lot of the producers were going non-union because I guess the certain protocols were set in place, and it was very difficult. And a certain percentage of the budget that came out of the film, it just didn't make sense to go union, I guess. So I mean, since this all happened, I think I've only auditioned about 4 times for feature films. Obviously, theater we won't see for a while, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, we're still very hopeful. We're optimists. We're cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
We're shut down for the rest of this year, certainly, but we're hopeful that by next summer that we'll have some version of theater somewhere.
Yes, I hope so.
We're looking at, maybe outdoor spaces. We're looking at percentages of the house. It may only be 25%, like the restaurants are doing sometimes. There's been outdoor seating in Cape May, for example. People seem to like it very much. And they only recently have opened it up to 25% indoors. But as it starts getting cold, and it will start getting cold, remains to be seen how that works, and if people will feel comfortable, even if they're allowed to do that, will they psychologically feel comfortable being inside, especially in the theater where, you're going to be if you're inside a theater, an actual building, for an hour or so with strangers, even if you're wearing a mask, it's a question.
No, yeah. And it's funny that you say people feel comfortable, because I know even if I venture out, I come back home and I'm washing my hands, and I feel like a little anxiety. I'm like, okay, I'm okay. So
how do you feel about the future? I mean, do you feel like it's going to turn around eventually, or?
I mean, hopefully the pandemic does, right? But as far as my career goes in the arts, I hope so. It always feels like every time I get the iron hot a little bit, something would happen. Because right after Death of a Salesman, I came home for the holidays. And when I came back, I had landed the role I've been searching for since 2017, when I seen it on Broadway, Sweat by Lynn Nottage.
Oh, Lynn Nottage, yeah.
Yeah, and so
why was that a role you'd been wanting to do?
It's taken me a long time to kind of understand myself as an artist and what roles I know that fit right up my alley. And the role of Jason, I remember watching I forget his name, who performed it originally on Broadway, but I just remember watching, and I'm like, I feel like that's a role I can really take on. And I was lucky enough, I always search Playbill, and it was kind of a funny story. I found I found it on Playbill, and they had open auditions, and I missed it by one day. So I was like, oh no. And it was close to the theater I just performed at. So I'm like, I have to see if anyone knows the artistic director. So I made every call to every connection I have. I said, hey, do you know such and such name? And of course, if people say, oh, no. And the one person's like, yeah. And they never reached out for me, but I was like, I have to think of something. So I seen they had callbacks on Friday or something. So I went there, and I had my friend Bobby Amundsen help me prepare. And I went in, and they're like, who are you here for? I said, Jason. And they're looking for my name, and my name wasn't on on the sheet. And I'm like, oh, well, someone told me just to come in, and then I could, they're like, okay, well, since your name's on the sheet, you have to go last. I was like, okay, fine. And then I just was so into the role. Like I wanted it so bad. And I walked in and it was a 200 plus seat theater out here. And I auditioned and she looked at me. She was like, "You look familiar." And she had seen Death of a Salesman.
Ah,
And she was like, "Oh, I remember you. You did it great." And she was very nice. And she was like, "Would you want to come back for our final callbacks and stuff?" And then I went back and they offered me the role of Jason. So I landed that right in the midst of when the pandemic was really starting to hit. And then obviously I couldn't take on that role. And then I was due to I was going to shoot a feature film in the Dominican Republic. So there's two projects I was set for 2020, and they're going to be on hold. Well, I don't. Well, the one's on hold. The other, I think I missed out on, but it's okay.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's an interesting example, Lynn Nottage's play Sweat, because here's a play, which, by the way, won the Pulitzer Prize, that deals with Pennsylvania. That takes place in Pennsylvania, doesn't it?
Yep.
So not terribly far from where you grew up, and deals with the economy and deals with race, among other things. And of course, one of the, I suppose, the three big topics that people are talking about, particularly with the election looming. One is, of course, pandemic. The second is the economy, and this was a play about losing jobs. And the third is race, and it's a play that deals with race. How do you think the play, or doing a play like Sweat, how do you think that it influences people who see it, or is it just entertainment at the end of the day?
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, I think every play kind of influences you in some sort of way, impacts you in each individual differently. I think a play like Sweat was kind of like a perfect timing, because I think at the end of it shows how people are all coming together as one. And what may seem like such a big deal at the time, it really isn't. We're just all human. And we all can learn to love each other, no matter what your race is or your religion or who you choose to love. That's all. That's your personal business. That's no one else's business. So I think that it does impact you in a way, and it just shows that, yeah, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to really explain fully what I'm trying to
Well,
say.
let me ask you a follow-up, which is, I mean, that's how it affected you, being
Yeah.
in it, but how do you think it affects an audience and the culture at large? Or does it?
Oh, I would hope it would affect them in a way that shows, like I said, it just. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to really answer that.
I don't know the answer either. I don't know if there even is.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, back in the 1930s, when we were in a similar circumstance, in a way, I mean, the Great Depression was happening, and people were worried about their jobs, and
Mhm.
there were people like Clifford Odets, playwrights who created a genre of plays called agitation propaganda plays, like Waiting for Lefty, which was a play about a strike, a labor strike.
Yeah.
And I think the first line of that play is, where's all our furniture? They repossessed all their furniture. So I always find it fascinating when, in times of extremity, and I think we're living in one right now,
Mhm.
times art can have some influence on the way people think, or at least it shows another side of an argument. And one of the missions at Cape May Stage is to provide a catalyst for discussion of the ideas of the time. So, I'm very aware, when I choose a season, of the kinds of plays that we do, and how it influences specifically the United States of America, but also the little town of Cape May.
Yeah.
So, on occasion, we've done readings of plays that just deal with the sea, for example.
Yeah.
We'll have a whole bunch of plays that deal with living on an island, or, plays like Edward Bond's The Sea, or Eugene O'Neill's sea plays, or, plays that in some way, the great Irish playwrights, Sean O'Casey and oh, I can't think of it right now, but Riders to the Sea, John Millington Synge, those great writers who write about living by a great body of water. So you have brought a great body of water with you from Cape May to Los Angeles. I think Los Angeles is better off because of you. I hope that the good parts of LA rub off on you. I know it's a crazy place. I found, maybe before I went there, people would warn me and with all of these cliches that, that nobody thinks in Los Angeles. And I found that not to be the case at all. I found, in fact, one of the first things that happened when I got there was I was invited to join a reading group. And in my group of like 5 people, one was an on-air news personality, one was a writer, a film writer, one was a doctor, and we read books that had nothing to do with any of our professions. We'd read books on religion or something, just to talk about something else.
Yeah.
And I found that to be, no matter where you go, there are those people, and that's true in California as well as on the East Coast.
No, absolutely. I mean, all the kind of Hollywood kind of nonsense. It's you can be in it if you want, and you can be out of it if you want. And I've always chose to kind of be out of it.
Yeah.
I'm not here for that. I just
Right.
want to figure out how to work consistently and just enjoy life while.
Well, I wish you well in that. I send you every good wish to work consistently and work in things that you're proud of. And I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of your courage to take that great leap, to go to outside your comfort zone. And I'm looking forward to seeing some great performances in the future.
Thank you, Roy. I really appreciate you reaching out, and I will talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you, Darrin. All the best.
Have a good one.
And goodbye to all of us here at Cape May Stage. And please visit our website and come back and take a look at some of the other programs we have. All the best. Bye now.